Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Bilingual Find Your Place podcast. Desiring to show that it is possible to make unpopular choices, even out of the norm, and be happy, wishing to prove that happiness comes from choosing yourself rather than giving in to popular pressure, I receive people who have made the best of a situation that put them in the different box. My name is Stephanie Bergo, and I'm the host of this show. I've been working as a potential catalyst for more than 10 years, and my mission is to allow people to give themselves the right to be all that they are, and thus believe that their dreams are achievable. Welcome to these interviews. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming to the Find Your Place podcast. Today, I'm super lucky to have a bilingual, she speaks 5 languages, so much more than bilingual, but she speaks French and English. Guest, Daria Vodopianova.
Amazing.
I wanted to make sure that it was well pronounced. I'm super happy to have you here today. Thank you for accepting my invitation.
Oh, it's a true pleasure, Stephanie, to be here with you today.
Pour nos invités francophones, donc Daria parle aussi le français. Si la conversation que nous avons aujourd'hui vous interpelle, vous pourrez aller voir son contenu puis savoir que c'est possible d'être suivi aussi en français.
Effectivement.
So I've been lucky enough to meet you online because you live now in Barcelona as I am in Montreal, but it was each time we had the chance to spoke together, it was a blessing, and I'm super happy to have you here today. So if we go back a bit just so people can follow what you do now, you're Russian Ukrainian. You're born in Russia. You moved in Sweden when you were 6 years old to live there, and then you moved again at 21 in France, which maybe explains how come you speak so well French.
Yes.
You lived there for a couple of years. I think you said 5, and then with your husband you moved again to Portugal, and then you moved again, and you traveled a lot, and now you're in Barcelona. Did you always knew you were gonna become an entrepreneur, like when you were in Sweden before going to France, or how was it at that time?
Great question. So I always knew that I was born entrepreneur, but I didn't know that I was, because I come from a family where I'm the first entrepreneur. My parents met at medical school, and I come from a home with academia, but also mostly my family members have been working as employees. So entrepreneurship was something that I wasn't experience at home, but from very young age I was very entrepreneurial. I remember even as a kid organizing things and creating small shops and thinking outside the box and not really understanding the rules in school, and always being very proactive. So I wasn't in school and in university, I was an entrepreneur for sure. And when I was 17, I was lucky to meet my mentor, and she was sometimes there are people in your life who bring you to the person you want to meet, and that person was actually my first ever boyfriend. That was his mother, and she was 23 when she had him. She came from a family that very, very hard conditions, and she grew 7 companies, a small business owner. Wow. 7 companies with 300 employees, and she became my mentor. I worked for her for 4 years. She is, in every podcast you listen to, I talk about her. We are still in touch after all these years. She's still my number 1 role model, because she opened the door and she saw my potential, and she gave me the opportunity to work for her and be mentored by her. as I was still studying at university. And by the age of 2021, I was running 5 offices in Sweden for her as a key account manager for one of her companies. So very young age, I started working as an entrepreneur and opened my own company when I was 21, 22, when I moved to France. So I think that I always been that, but she really accelerated that by seeing my potential. And this is why I'm always very much for mentorship and role models, because mentors can make such a huge difference, like she did for me.
Yes, clearly. And what were you studying at that time?
So I was studying law. I was studying European law. I didn't know that I will do business because I have what I think, I haven't checked, but I think I have dyscalculia, which just means that I have a hard time with numbers. And when I read numbers, it's really hard for me, like dyslexia, but with numbers.
Yes.
So I was thinking that I cannot study business. And I didn't know that entrepreneurship was not only numbers, and all these calculations. So as I come from a family with academia, I was thinking, well, either you study business, economics, or you study, doctor and lawyer. And I thought law is always good to have. So I studied European law, not even knowing what am I going to do with it, to be honest, but I wanted to have a degree.
Have you ever worked in that field?
I haven't worked in that field. I have used it in my work. Let's say it that way. So when I was working for this company in the beginning, I did work on some, part of the contracts and, developing contracts. And that has always been good. I don't regret it because law for me is very fascinating. And it's something that we can always, it feels very empowering to know your rights and to be able to read contracts and to write contracts for work or for private space. And so I'm very happy with that still.
Yes, clearly. And I can relate. I did a master's degree in art and culture management, which I'm not working in, but the management part and the accountant part and the numbers and the business management has helped me through my career all the time too. So I can really relate. And I think everything we do, even though it doesn't serve concretely a purpose, is a piece of the puzzle of what we become after.
Definitely. I completely agree. Yes.
So you've been lucky enough, like, to meet a mentor that believed in you and that made you progress much more rapidly than if you had done it yourself. And I think that mentorship, that's exactly the purpose of a great mentorship, is to shorten the time you use to do some stuff you would have learned and feel supported when you do those. So you finally decide, I imagine, or I think you probably leave her son, because you said that she was your first stepmom, so a mother-in-law, not stepmom, mother-in-law. So you leave him, you decide to move to France. For what purpose at that time?
So funny enough, I was 21, and if you can imagine, I was studying law, but I was running an office with 5 offices in Sweden for her, for one of their coaching. Actually, it was a coach in a private coaching company for career development. I was running for them.
Very cool.
And the problem with that was that I was still a student, 21-year-old, never had experience what it meant to be a student. So I had 6 months left of my studies, and I asked my mentor, my boss, to give me an opportunity to go do an Erasmus exchange program in France. So I literally looked on the map and I said, where is the beach? And where can, I need to experience this. I need to experience this. How does it feel to not go to work?
Part.
The youth. I said, I have, before I take on more responsibility as I finish my studies, I want to experience what does it mean to be a student without anything else to do than just study. And I went away for 6 months to Montpellier in the south of France. I did not speak the language. I lied on when I wrote that I speak it. And I just want to go to the south of France or wherever. Actually, Cadiz was my first choice in Spain. It was literally like, where is the beach? Yes, of course I speak Spanish. Yes, of course I speak French. We're gonna figure this out after. And I come to France, and there's this Erasmus miracle, like everyone talks about. You know, you just go there and somehow you get your degrees. They know that you're not there really for the studies, but it was actually one of the best things I could do, because when you are in this thing of just being in your everyday, you know, you're just in your hamster wheel. Even at 20, when you're studying, you don't see clearly. It took me out for 5-6 months. It was the first time I was unplugged from this just going, and I could ask myself the question, what do I want to do with my life? And that was an opportunity for me to realize that actually I want to have my own company. I want to open my own, you know, I'm ready after 4 years of working for someone. I have the courage to, at a young age, just to go for it. So that's what I did.
That's super interesting when you say unplugged. I told you before we started the interview. At 21, I found out I was pregnant. I was finishing a bachelor degree here in Montreal, and being pregnant made me realize that I was studying actually Spanish and Chinese Mandarin in university. And finally, I had a aha moment where I was like, okay, I love languages because I love communication, and I love being able to communicate with the most. But finally, learning it in school is not that fun and not that useful, because after you really need to practice. Even though you know all the grammar rules and the stuff, you need to practice. And I found out I was pregnant, and finally I decided to switch studies completely to go in communication and social. So it was very interesting. And same thing, it unplugged me from the path I was going, because I didn't know what I was gonna do with the languages. But with the Mandarin part, many businesses were interested in the fact I was speaking like 4 languages. And finally today, couple of years after, I don't speak it because I didn't practice it in the last 15 or 18 years. So I totally understand what you mean by unplug, like you are on a path and the train is going and you're working, taking care of 5 offices, doing the study thing. It's exactly the same thing. I was studying, taking care of my daughter, and I was like going and like that unplugged me from the path I was on. At first, I changed path, and then having her was like super strong to make sure that I make sure to be on the right path. So whenever I felt like it was not good for me anymore, or that I need something else, I change.
Yes.
And I imagine, for knowing a bit your path now, I imagine that Erasmus did that a bit for you, because it unplugged you, but it also teach you. First, you're able to learn a language you didn't talk, like even if you said yes. Second, you moved to a new country and you met new people, and you were able to start your business, as you said. So I say it's like an evidence of being able, and then it follows you through all the rest of the things you choose.
And the thing is that there's this gap, there is a void, because my identity in Stockholm was, you know, the key account manager for the company, the student. I had so many, I had an identity of the city girl. And then here I come, Montpellier, south of France. Nobody knows my background. Nobody knows, you know, I used to be an entrepreneur dinners with like the Skype founder in the Nobel Prize, you know, like room, like very much like high level entrepreneurial gathering. And here I am, 21-year-old student. I am reinventing myself, my identity. I'm in a small town, and I remember being in my 9 square meters student dorm, like literally super small, and sitting and listening to, I like to listen to French rap, and I was listening to French rap, and I was drawing, because I used to draw a lot when I was younger, and I just drawed, and I was sitting there and just feeling like, wow, I am feeling myself again. I can feel my emotions. And this gap was very disturbing, but also it was the first time I experienced what we call identity upgrades. You know, when you have to go through this, which you have to do if you want to talk about quantum leap, or if you want to grow out of your, you know, your patterns, your triggers, your traumas, your bad behaviors, your mental blocks, there is always a moment of silence and void where you need to sit with it. And it can be painful not to know who you are in that moment, but that was the first time I experienced that void, and that helped me to know that whenever I'm going through this, on the other side, something bright is coming.
That's super interesting, because it's sometimes very, very insecure to feel like that. And like you were young, you put yourself into that situation.
Yes.
So you were kind of maybe unconsciously craving something like that.
Yeah.
And it brings you back to drawing, to music, to meeting new people. And as you were saying it, in Sweden you were known, you were, even though you were very young, you had a status, and then you come back to no status, nobody knows me. And
Yeah.
I imagine you make friends there with
Yeah.
young people that have a different type of life that you have.
Exactly.
And so at that time, you decided to start a business. What did you start at that time?
So I met my partner first day when I arrived, and I did not plan for it. So that was also, of course, something that played out. I still had my job. I was still a manager for a company. So I went back to Sweden and worked for another 6 months before I had the courage to leave my life that I had for 15 years in Sweden. And when I came down, I was thinking, what can I do? I wanted to be in France, and I had this, you know, I'm 21-year-old. I can screw up because I'm still young. It doesn't matter what I do. I can always go back. There's always, you know, there was this feeling of, if I fail, that's okay. Now is the time to fail. That's how it felt. So there was this fearlessness of trying things. So I came there and I was thinking, I probably cannot get the same type of, you know, position I had in Sweden, where I was, you know, really running offices and teams, and I had a really interesting job, and I was so free and supported. And at the same time, law, I could not see myself working in law. It felt so restrictive and suffocating to be in an office 9 to 5. Never experienced that. So I felt, why not languages? So when I met my partner, who speaks 12 languages, I speak 5, I decided that that's a good way for us to kind of figure out what we want to do in the beginning and start with something that we do naturally, which is languages. He just stopped working as an IT engineer, and I just finished that. So we both came from a very like fresh start, and we could, I opened a small language school, and then we built that out, and that became quite a bigger, you know, I mean, we were working with bigger companies. We had a center where we work with business communication and language we developed a language method, and we developed ways to support professionals to improve their communication, de-traumatize language experience, presentation skills as well in other languages. We became a language coaching. That was my first way. After working with, you know, career coaching, I moved into language coaching, which we worked on communication coaching, presentation coaching, and supporting professionals with that. And then I opened a non-for-profit as well to create a lab for cross-cultural communication. It was called the Language Caravan. So I was very much involved for 5 years in that. And it wasn't planned. I think that's the thing, if you know, someone is listening or watching this, is that most of the times I don't really know what I'm doing. It's almost like life is offering, I'm interacting with life. I came to France, I was feeling
opportunity.
I was feeling languages is natural for me. Sébastien speaks 12, I speak 5. I have a business background, you know, I've been working, opening and running companies. Why don't we start here? And then I start to feel like I want to explore cross cultures. I created the lab. I was missing a lab, and then the non-for-profit was a space where I invited artists, linguists, historians and different people to explore languages, culture, theater actors. It was so much, exploration. We had the radio as well. So it was always a moment of what happens next, what can we explore? TEDx came, he wanted to do TEDx, he got invited on TEDx, that blew up. And it was, there's a quote that I love that says, ideas come from contribution or contradiction. And I feel like those steps, for me at least, happens when I interact with life. I can know what's next step when I interact with life and I'm present to what's going on right now. So this is how I open my companies and all my projects.
So at that time you were in France working in languages, helping businesses and people with communication. And you've talked a bit about it at the TEDx part. So what's the gap between that moment and now what you're doing? So first, you're still with Sébastien. So the first day you met your partner and you're still together years after. What happened between the 5 years in France and today, what you're building and doing?
So what happened was twofold. One was that if you go back to my mentor, I remember how much it impacted me. So that was the beginning of me wanting to spend the rest of my life passing it on, female leadership and helping mentoring others, and supporting others to see what's possible. So that was my first feeling. And the second feeling was that Sébastien wanted to go and speak about, he had the method and he had something to say, and he was really looking to be on stages. He's he knows he's an actor, musician, he's used to be on stage. So he wanted to be on TEDx, and he got to do a TEDx that really took off. It has more than 300,000 views in French now. It was a huge success. But with that success came an incomprehension. How do we deal with this success? Because up to that moment, we knew how to do, a simple, small scale business in a small town in France. But in that moment, when, internet blows up and you have people literally contacting you to work on different things, we did not have the capacity to scale. And for 2 years, we were looking at the model that can support us as thought leaders who has a method, who has an expertise to grow. And the problem is that a lot of institution at that point, that was more than, I think, almost 10 years ago now, maybe eight years ago, they were talking about the Berlitz style kind of way of growing a language school, which was get yourself an office, get the big loan, train trainers, and then you become the micromanager of the company. But as an expert, that's not what you want to do. You want to be on stage, you want to coach, you want to consult, you want to do the retreats, you want to be out and serve. The model is different. The model is, I am the face of the company, and then I have a support system, more like an artist would do. Beyonce will not go and train the trainer mini Beyoncés and then sit in an office. It's the same with an expert. So this is when I realized, there are two things I realized. One was that we need to understand how to grow a business around Sebastian's expertise specifically and his method for us, because we are stuck. So this is why we went to Australia to actually learn how to, work with thought leadership. And for secondly, the speaking came in at that point because he started to get invited more with the method. He got more invited, and I started to get invited too, because we started to be in those speaker circuits. And I started to turn it down because I did not see myself as a speaker. I was feeling that I am here to support Sébastien. I'm here to support my team. I'm here to support the volunteers for the non-for-profit. It's not about me. I am not here to shine. This is it's not the ego show with me. That's how it felt for me. And then I had two girls come into me who opened a non-for-profit, I think, or maybe it was a for-profit, but a small organization in the city I was living, and then asked me to come and share my founder story. And I really said no, but they were very insisting. So that at some point I did go and did it for them. I just shared my story, and it felt so nice, and I had so much feedback of just sharing my story that I realized that, oh, this is me passing on what my mentor gave me, but to a group. And that kind of started to shift my idea. But the second thing that really shifted me, seeing speaking as leadership, a form of leadership, was when I got invited. I think I turned down one TEDx, and then I turned down a lot of speaking opportunities. And then in Melbourne, when we moved to Australia, the TEDx organizers invited me to speak, and I was about to turn it down again and say no. And Sébastien came to me and said, well, Daria, you are so involved in the female empowerment, female leadership movement. You really want to see more women on stage, and you're not doing it yourself. How are you an example for other women? And I was just like, I had nothing to say, because that was true, that I was not seeing how much I was not in my integrity of my values, that I literally I could not say yes. So I did say yes to that, speaking to that first TEDx that I did. And from that, I start to realize that the importance of, it's never about me, the stage. The stage is about me. Speaking is one of the strongest forms of leadership. We all are communicating in TEDx, in podcasts, on Facebook Lives, Instagram Lives. We are doing communication. So you are a speaker. If you have a brand, a personal brand, you're a speaker. And if you're not learning how to make the most out of it, you are not allowing you to create the biggest impact you want to create in this world. So for me, I realized that speaking is one of the strongest way to create impact, to understand how to use and utilize speaking, like we will do with sales and marketing. If you don't know how to do sales, you cannot have a company. If you don't know how to do marketing, you will have a hard time attracting. But speaking is one of the strongest way of doing marketing, because you are leading by example, you're showing, it's such a strong and powerful way. The problem was that I was seeing was that it was so closed industry. It was so hard to understand, how do I actually do this? So my mission has become to democratize the speaking industry. I want to show exactly how to get on stages, how to write bios, how to get booked, how to create a stage, how to become a better speaker, how to leverage that for your business. Like, that is what I'm doing. I'm giving away all the cards, because I do believe that the industry is too close. And I want to see more people, more diversity, more women, but not only women, but in general, more diversity on stage, because I don't want that stage to be for a couple of chosen one. We are done with that. It's time to really revolutionize who has a voice on a stage. And this is my way of supporting that mission.
Yes, I love many, many things about what you've said. First, I spoke on stages a couple of times, and I had that impression that it was like a boys' band, even like many women are starting to have speaker gigs and are very, very interested, very, very interesting, but often it's still much more men first. Second, working in female entrepreneurship for years now, taught me that often women are too humble, and the word too is very important. Is sometimes you don't want to shine because you think it's gonna be for yourself, and you see it as something, as if it was a problem. And like you, I had this realization a couple of months ago for myself. I was speaking as an expert and it was okay, but speaking about myself was a big problem in podcast, in social media. And I had a talk with one of my clients I've been following for the past 3 years, and he has a gym, and even during the pandemic he grew his business times and times, because he was very, very good at social media and at being there and at sharing stuff. And one day we have a talk together, and he says, you know what, it's very, very selfish that you're not sharing your stuff. And I was like, what? And he was like, yes, I'm super lucky. We've been working together for years, and you have many, many things to share, but it's very selfish. You're not. And I was like, yeah, but I'm shy. I don't like to have the light on me. And he was like, yeah, but by doing this, because it's difficult for you, you're private, what's the word in English? Privé.
Deprive?
Yeah, you're depriving people from all the learnings and the knowledge and the thing you've gone through. And
Yeah.
honestly, it made a big impression on me, and I started sharing a bit of who I am, what I've done, and everything. And it was very, very interesting for me, that path. And in your story, I see that Sébastien, for many things, has been the catalyst. And in that special case, he was like, he was, as you said, he was true about, if you're not going that path yourself, it's very difficult to be an example of what you want to see in the world.
Yeah. It's it really challenges you in terms of speaking will challenge your leadership in so many ways, because there will be moments, and every speaker, no matter how experienced you are, will feel the moments of imposter. Who am I to be on this stage? I am a fraud. They have, they have taken the wrong person, and am I good enough? Will they like this? There, all the things comes up, and what I feel is that when you have people supporting you through this and reminding you, it's not on how good you are on that stage. One, you can get trained. It's an art form. We train speakers. We media train them for podcasts. We media train them for workshops, for talks. You can get trained for that. But most importantly, by just with you being on that stage, just by you saying, I'm gonna go on that podcast, gonna go on that stage, you're already changing the industry, because you are stepping into the arena. You're stepping into the arena, and you say that my voice matters, and my presence matters in this room. I'm not gonna sit on the corner. I'm not gonna be passively watching and listening while the conversation is happening and saying, but I don't agree. I step into the space and I say what I have to say. And just by being on that stage, and that can be a virtual stage, going live, it's a virtual stage. That's why speaking is not only about the conference, it's all the time. Being on the podcast, you're speaking. So me choosing to overcome my fears, my limitations, all the things, and saying, this is not about me. It's about every woman. You shared, Stephanie, that you were 21 when you had your first child. You have 3 kids, you have your business, you have created such a beautiful impact just by the fact that you create the podcast and you go on stage and speak. You are impacting a woman who might feel, but I am a single mother and I will not be able to do that. Or a single dad. Doesn't have to be only women, but basically we are mirrors. And so me being Russian, Ukrainian, first entrepreneur in my family, there's so many things, so many odds against me being here where I am today. And that is just a mirror for someone to say, but she did it. So the 4-minute mile, right? I can also run that mile because someone else did it. We need to see examples of people that remind us of ourselves. That is why we do the stage.
And that's exactly the purpose behind that podcast. Trouve ta place in French, find your place in English, is I've been inspired by so many women and men that were doing stuff I thought was impossible. We were a bit talking, you and I, about Melanie Ann Layer earlier. We've met in her world, and I've come across Melanie because in Quebec she talks about it often, but in Quebec last year she did the front page of the news because she bought a house, an expensive house, and it was the most expensive in the region. And I've been working in women entrepreneurship for years. I didn't know who she was, and I was like, okay, who is she? She's successful, she's a woman, and I don't know her, and that's how I get interested in her. And then finally I watched a masterclass last year and bought AFE and spent a year in her world, and now that the news put her up front, she's now much more present here in our surrounding. And I was like, oh. And I told you a bit earlier, one thing that I want to do when I do training, when I share, is doing it less the educational way, because I've been teaching, I've been building PowerPoints for years. And at what point it became heavy for me. And when I met her and started following her training and her stuff, I felt it very light. So when you're saying do it not only for you, but for the people watching, the podcast is exactly that. Because people were telling me, yes, but Steph, you're the exception. You have 3 kids and you're still having a business and working and do that stuff. I've invited people that have 5 kids.
Yeah.
And that's, I would like people to watch that show or listen to it and say to themselves, oh, I thought it was impossible, but she did it or he did it. And just building small evidence that it's something possible, and that even though you're not there now, believing it's possible, it's the first step to being able eventually to do it. And when you become strong enough, one day you won't need evidence to continue your path, because being the example you want to be in the world will be enough to pursue whatever you feel like it. But the first step to becoming exactly what you want is believing it's possible. And the podcast for me is exactly that. Showcasing people that have chosen paths that are not the most walked and that are challenging. Entrepreneurship, traveling, being in a marriage, all of the, being a parent, all of those for me are challenging at some point. So pursuing those dreams, those vision, I want people to be able to see that in many people, and what they will see in you is not exactly the same as they will see in me and as they will see in another invitee. And that's really the purpose behind the podcast. And I'm working on a book I've been working on a book for the past 6 years, and it's women entrepreneurs portraits, because I felt in Quebec that there were many men entrepreneur portrait. Women entrepreneur were mostly big entrepreneurs, where it's very difficult to see yourself in a woman owner that has thousands of employees. So I've made 21 portraits of women, all different type of businesses, people. So it's been my mission for the past 6 or 7 years, and I love you saying that. And honestly, it reinforced what my client was telling me, like it's selfish to keep it to yourself, because when I hear you say that by sharing, you're coming to the table and making sure that others see it, it's very important. Very important. And I'm super impressed on your path. And I told you before the show, I love what Sébastien and yourself are doing. We were talking at first about the languages, school languages, or the caravan. Now we're talking about the speakership. Did you close the school? Did it transfer out? Because you're not doing it at the same way you were talking about Berlioz and everything. So what's the the crossing now that you're doing? You closed that school, you opened something else. What did you do?
So in 2016, we closed the school because it was more the transition to something bigger. It's sometimes I feel we talk about that in our academy, that there's a rebirth phase as an expert where you outgrow your current expertise, and we felt that languages was not really giving us an opportunity to impact on the bigger scale. What it was really about was communication. So we already started doing public speaking at that point in other languages, and the transition was quite natural. The difference was that in 2016 we moved into 2016 2017 into Thought Leadership Academy, because what I realized was that my role was always to work on the business. So seeing that the question I was asking myself is, how can we develop a sustainable, thriving, exciting business around our expertise? And how can we feel free and that there is space for us to grow and really develop methodology, develop our, really being able to be the, like I call our clients, mind artists. We are very much in the creative process when we develop ideas. So that was the question I went with when I went to Australia, and again went away just to really change an environment to understand how this works. We lived in Melbourne for a while, and from that point the transitioning became that we moved into the public speaking space, and then we moved into thought leadership, and this is what we've been doing since 2017 probably. We started 2018, I think that was the one we really started with the company, and then we've been doing this for the last 4 or 5 years. And what we do is basically what we were needing at that point, to have in one part, you talk about transformational speaking. So I have a hashtag I usually joke about this: burn the PowerPoint, because PowerPoint is, keeping us away from communication. We are watching the PowerPoint, we are not watching the audience. So I always freak out the event organizer because I don't have PowerPoints. I come to any talk, where it's the business school or conference, rarely would I have a PowerPoint. If it's maybe a one-day training, I might have a PowerPoint, but for a talk, I would probably never have that. And that is our way of working with transformational speaking, is really, when Sébastien trains our speakers and our clients, it's to help them to develop their speaker persona, which is not how do you create a good PowerPoint, it's how do you become a speaker that brings a transformation and change when they speak. Because there's a difference between being a good speaker and a speaker that actually creates change on the stage and impact. So that's what we do. And what I always loved is my brain works in that way, that I like to see what is going on and what is missing. And this is when I started to realize, my first question was, how do we develop a business around our expertise that feels good? And that is something we did with the thought leadership. And then the next question was, how do we develop offerings that feels good? So we went into premium pricing, because I don't like to do marketing and ads and all that. So we do we not only teach premium pricing for our clients. So we have that business part. But then we also had my question was, how do I develop my speaking to support my mission? And that's where legacy came in our program. So we start to understand the business of speaking. How do we actually do this? Because that was something that I didn't understand before, because I was looking for information. So I'm kind of the one capturing information, translating that into methodology, and then implementing and testing it out and bringing it to my clients. And the last part that came with COVID was leadership and self-leadership and the feminine masculine, where I realized how much I've been pushing from the masculine up to that point, because my masculine is very strong. I'm very strategic. I'm very self-driven, very much, action-oriented. But I did realize that there was something missing, and that was the self-leadership and learning how to lead myself with my vision, with my emotions, working with intuition, working with the power of the feminine. So that is something that we have integrated in the business as well, to really develop that radiance, that posture as a leader. So you are a strong leader as your business is growing with the speaking and the actual more clients come into your world. How do you hold that space? How do you develop yourself? Because that's something that we also need to learn.
Yeah, clearly. And your new model is much more scalable also. You were talking about it earlier. It was a problem when Sébastien did his TED Talk, because people were coming in and you had nothing like to offer for that amount of people. So now it's much more scalable. That must have been a question also.
Absolutely. And we developed a model that is not only scalable, because online courses can be scalable, but also creates actual transformation and results for our clients. Totally. So we have really developed a way of coaching and training that is a hybrid version, where there is implementation, where there is a focus on methodology, a framework, there is a focus on, actionable. And this is something that has allowed our clients to really have the success, because online courses, most courses people don't, it can be good for me to have an online course, but only if maybe maximum 15% of the people will actually go through the course. We buy courses, but we don't do them. So my focus has always been, how can this be good for me, but how can it be good for my clients, that actually they are also getting results from me. So that it's not only let's create the passive income, but how can we both have, I am feeling good in this business, this is scalable, and you are getting results and you are getting support, the support that you need. So I see our business as like, I compare it with a 5-star boutique hotel. I want it to feel that way when someone comes in, that there is this elegance and this feeling of care, even if it's scalable, even if there's a lot of personal touch to it.
And often I have this discussion with entrepreneurs, telling them that it's okay to have revenue and have passive income, but the importance of impact is very, very wide, because that brings your business to be sustainable. So if people comes in your world and get result and feel that they're caring for and that everything is made for them to succeed, clearly they will come back. Next time they need something you're doing, they will come back. And so it's much more sustainable too. And it's, in your case, with the speakership, it's a virtuous circle, because people want to hear you speak about what you're doing, and then they're interested in what you can bring, and then they want to hear you again. And so it's an amazing, well, it's an amazing business model, but it's also an amazing way of doing things. And I think that you're very good at simplifying the world of speakership for those that are not totally in, or for those that are seeing it from outside. So that's very interesting. I really enjoyed our talk. Clearly we could go like this for hours. There's many things you can share. What I will leave with is your strength in showing up and making sure that even though it was feeling insecure for you, and you step up and started speaking out, and you help people doing this very strongly. And second, each time you feel you need to rewire some stuff, you clearly do it with traveling, or with changing spot, or with building new stuff. Thanks a lot for sharing all of those with me today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you for everyone who listened and watched. I truly enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, everyone. Please come back next time. If you have any question, please feel free to write those to me. And if they are for Daria, I will clearly transfer them to her. Thanks a lot. Have a nice day and see you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode. Come back next week with another guest that has a fascinating story to tell and that will inspire you to take action towards your own path. If you like this show, I'm inviting you to leave a 5-star review. That way, it helps us to spread the work and fulfill our mission even more. The podcast is also available in a video format on YouTube. You'll find it under the same name, Trouve ta place, Find your place, under Catalyseur de Potentiel. Let's connect on social media. You'll find me as Stéphanie Bergaud or Catalyseur de Potentiel on Facebook or Instagram. Have a great day.